I really needed to like Project Puppies for Christmas for 3 reasons. I love John Ratzenberger. I love adorable Christmas films about dogs. And I paid quite a bit of money for this. It wasn't tremendously expensive, but it's not available in the UK, so I did have to import the DVD from the States, so it was a little expensive. Having now watched it, I can say that it's okay. It's the kind of film that could be good to put on if you're wrapping Christmas gifts, you just need a bit of company. As a sit-down film, it's very slow. And there were times when I was feeling a little bit bored, but it was also very sweet. So the messages are nice, the characters are nice, but as a story, it wasn't the most engaging. This was released in 2019. It's directed by Hewitt Owens. It's written by Charidy, Wronski, and we have a cast including, of course, John Ratzenberger. We also have Morgan Bastin and Piper Sher. And this is about 2 girls who both want puppies, but they're quite expensive. So they decide to do a good deed. And if they do a good deed, Santa will bring them puppies for Christmas. And I do have some problems with some of the messages here, and I'll talk about those at the end of the discussion because they are spoilers. So I will give a spoiler warning in due course. But for the most part, this will be spoiler free. And they decide to do various good deeds, and I don't want to give away what they are because that's the bulk of the narrative. But throughout the film, we have a lot of heartwarming moments. We have the character of Daniel Nilwater, played by Ratzenberger, and I will say he's in it pretty much right the way throughout the whole film. So if you're a Ratzenberger fan, that's pretty brilliant. I was definitely very happy with that. And I don't want to say too much about his character. I don't want to give away too much, but he's a very interesting, very well-written character. I did like what he brought to the story. I think all of the characters are quite interesting, well-written, absolutely no problems there. The performances are generally very good, certainly from our leads. And we have a decent variety in the locations. We have a nice Christmas feel to a lot of it. I'd say it's a good one to get into the Christmas spirit. It's heartwarming. Visually, it has a decent festive feel, but it's not over the top. So if you don't like Christmas films where everything is just decorated in tinsel and everything's red and green, it's not as in your face as that. The technical aspects are fine, nothing spectacular, but the camera works okay. The music didn't really stand out to me, which means that it's not a problem, and I always appreciate that. So in general, the only real issue is that it's quite slow. And while the majority of the scenes are heartwarming and moving, they are quite slow. And not a lot happens that's interesting. And that means that it's not really engaging, and that's why I suggest it as either background company or something to put on when you're doing other festive activities, perhaps. But if you want to watch a film where you're going to sit down and become fully immersed in it, it's not impossible. But it is quite a slow experience, and at times it's a little bit, I don't want to say tedious, that's maybe too strong a word, but it's definitely quite slow. One may choose to use the word gentle, and that's certainly the case, but there are plenty of times when not a lot is happening. But thankfully, even in those moments, we might have some festive imagery, or we have some good characters, or it's delivering a good message. Even if the actual activities are not that interesting to watch, the message is still quite nice. So I'd say most scenes have something of value, even if the story itself at times is not the strongest. So do I recommend it? Yes, if it's readily available to you. Unless, like me, you love Ratzenberger and you're willing to import it just for Ratzenberger, I'd say it's probably not worth the price. I can't remember how much I paid for it. I think it was maybe 20 something pounds, which is not a tremendous amount, but for a film that I don't think is that great, is a pretty good chunk of money. So I wouldn't say it's worth it if you're just looking for a random Christmas recommendation, but if it's readily available to you, then sure, put it on. You might enjoy bits of it. And I will now discuss a couple of things that I don't completely agree with regards to the messages. So these are spoilers, and I'm going to discuss what happens at the end of the film. And of course, at the end of the film, well, I say of course, I wasn't 100% sure it was going in this direction, but at the end of the film, the girls do get their puppies. Now, on the one hand, yes, they did good deeds. They should be rewarded for being kind, generous individuals. But I would rather the good deeds themselves were the rewards. And there are 2 reasons for this. One, that would have just been a much stronger message. Do things to be a good person, not just to get something. That being said, the children don't come across as greedy or demanding. They are genuinely very well-behaved, likeable children, and I do think they got joy out of helping people for the sake of helping people. But at the same time, their motive at the end of the day was to get the dogs. So I think they could have done a much better message and not given them the puppies, and maybe, I don't know, had them volunteering at a dog shelter instead so they got to spend time with the animals, but they realised that helping people was actually a much more rewarding gift than having a puppy. The other thing I don't agree with is that they're actually, at the start of the film, they're in a pet store and they ask how much the dog is and they're told the price and they have to leave because they can't afford it. Understandably, it's very, very expensive. If you can't afford to buy the dog, you can't afford to keep the dog. Because while that's a lot of money in one chunk, dogs are very expensive. And they've been given these puppies, but they couldn't afford to buy the dog. So how can they afford to keep the dog? Because you have vet bills, pet insurance, dog food. I think cat food is expensive. Dog food seems to be even more expensive, which makes sense. Generally, at least bigger dogs do eat more than the average cat, but it's so costly. So I don't like the fact that at the start of the film, they were saying, look, we just can't afford this, which is fair enough. But then you're going to get a dog as a gift at the end of the film. But at the start, we showed that we couldn't actually afford to keep the dog. We couldn't afford the dog. If you can't afford to buy it, you can't afford to keep it. And I don't think that's a very good message. And it's one of the reasons why I don't agree with giving pets away for free. It is one of the reasons why I do agree that animal shelters charge a fee. I know some people believe that the animals should be given away for free, but I think the animals will end up in the wrong homes in the long run if that happens. I don't agree with extortionate costs for animals, but at the end of the day, if you can't afford to buy the dog, there is no way you can afford the upkeep because it gets ridiculously expensive. So I don't agree with that either. So there are some pretty bad things at the end that I don't think were good ideas, and they could have absolutely gotten around that by, as I said, maybe letting them volunteer at an animal shelter, or maybe they take up dog walking in the neighborhood. Well, they're not that young. They are a little older than I would have thought to be believing in Santa. But if somebody wants to believe in Santa at an older age, I don't care. That's fair enough. But maybe they could have done dog walking. A neighbour could have had a dog and they could have volunteered to care for it. There are ways around this where they could have got the best of both worlds. The messages would have been stronger and it wouldn't be encouraging people to get dogs that they can't afford to keep. So ultimately, not great. But at the same time, I will admit the ending was very sweet because we got these adorable little puppies. So not great, but in general, it's an okay film. We got plenty of Ratzenberger, so I was very, very happy about that. Project Puppies for Christmas has its problems, but there are some positives. And if you're curious and if you have access to it, then I'd say maybe it's worth watching once.